Hello again, everyone. This is Professor Masudul Choudhury, continuing on my earlier initial 3 to 5 YouTube lectures. And the main theme of those lectures is the structure of Tawhid as law. Tawhid meaning monotheism, oneness of God, how it can be brought into the hub of scientific explanation of things that we conceptualize and apply the concepts to practical problems. So it is a structure of the Tawhidi law in the socio-scientific world system, meaning that it is equally applicable to the realm of physical sciences as also to the realm of the social sciences, included in which is, of course, economics, finance, science, and society. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, there is a formalism by which an episteme, that is, the theory of knowledge, is derived from the foundation of the Tawhidi law as law, and I underline that as law. Although, those who understand the Quran know that Tawhid is the cardinal principle of Islamic belief and the cardinal principle of the monotheistic law. But nonetheless, the Tawhid, as we so understand it, can be taken up at two levels. One is the level of self, that is belief, which is essential. But nonetheless, belief itself is not externalized. We don't know how to read the degree of belief. So Tawheed then takes up its second manifestation, which is the important one for us in the building of the scientific understanding. And this is Tawheed as law. That is to say, how do you interpret the oneness of God, the monotheism, in the order, scheme, and order of things? By observing them, conceptualizing them, applying formalism, methods, models, and going into realm of empirical work and deriving inferences from those empirical results. The first of the things that I had explained to you earlier in the building blocks of our understanding from the law of Tawheed is number one, the ontology. This is the ontology. Now the ontology is again divided up into two parts. One is the original, that is primal. That is, it is a non-created entity that gives shape, form, explanation, formalism, models, analysis, empirics, as well as the continuity of all of these things in the very first place. This is the primal ontology, and this is the ontology of God's oneness, which is the monotheistic law. And I represent it with the monotheistic law, MT, or which is the same as saying that it is T. That is Tawheed as law. The second part of the ontology derives itself from the primal ontology, and this is functional. And in the functional ontology, we create things out of the primal ontology as law. That is, as we are directed to observe, to understand the world, and put it into shapes and forms. This is functional ontology. And there is a connectedness. So it is a connectedness of this type. Excuse me. The second part of the building blocks of this entire Tawhidi law in relation to the world system is the epistemology. And this is the derivation of knowledge from the ontological premise. It is derivation of knowledge. That is, and it is manifested in terms of the concept, the precept of the unity or the episteme of unity of knowledge. The unity of knowledge, therefore, takes its form by the derivation of a specific, um, understand level or degree of our worldly knowledge. And this data is derived from, it is taken out from the function, from the primal ontology, which we represented by omega and mapped onto the world system by a mapping called S. Now, omega, in the Islamic literature, in the Islamic worldview, the methodological worldview, omega acquires the position of the Quran. And the Quran is therefore the fullness of knowledge. And it is mapped little at a time to the world system by means of an intermediating function. And this is S. S is known in the Islamic belief as the Sunnah, that is the teachings of the Prophet. And theta is through the process of discourse between them to derive knowledge from the omega and S as the primal ontology. Then we come to theta, which is a bit of knowledge, a knowledge that we derive at a time in respect of the discourse. Now, when you go into this phase, then of course a world arises. And this world that we observe is a world of study, of scientific investigation, and we represent it by various different categories of entities, of variables, and relationship between variables. And we represent it in general by x, the variable x, and it is embedded by the knowledge theta, meaning to say that there is a specific way of observing and analyzing and constructing the world system. That way is really to organize the world system in terms of the unity of knowledge, that is, unity between things, in terms of the balances between them, in terms of the pairing organism that exists between different selected kinds of goods. This is the X theta. From the X theta, it exists in time. As X theta essentially is a space. It requires a space, and that space is represented by S, and that S is embedded by theta. S theta is therefore a realm, a domain of things happening and being observed, being examined. And all of these things, these together, they happen at certain points in time. This T is a time variable, which too is embedded by the knowledge theta, meaning to say that everything that we observe in the universe, that things take up meaning and can be explained in terms of the unity of knowledge, the episteme of the unity of knowledge, are always happening at certain points in time. T is therefore a recorder. It is not a doer of things. T doesn't do things. And thus, from these three categories, theta, fundamentally the first, which is derived from the primal ontology, and the second is the space, and the third is the time. We have therefore an event that comes about, and this event is the event that is made up of theta, and we call that x theta, or space of theta, and the time theta. And this E is therefore, it occupies a coordinate, and this is the coordinate that, let us say that this is the coordinate that E occupies. But when E occupies a coordinate, it's one of the many elements that are in that realm of many, many events. And therefore there is another one, E2, near to it, farther away from it, whatever, and there is E3, and so on and so forth. And in between these three categories are interrelationships. That's the interrelationship that we represent by that. I'm going to relate some of these to continue on. Now, the property of this event is such that if you have three events, they are not independent of each other. Rather, they are interconnected with each other. They are interrelated both ways like this. And thus, when you come into learning processes of theta, going into higher spaces and higher levels of learning and understanding of the episteme of oneness of knowledge, this takes a form of an evolutionary thing. And any positive monotonic transformation of this kind of positive interrelationship between E1, E2, E3, and so on and so forth is a function of theta. Is a function of theta. So we have an evolutionary process here, and this evolutionary process is continuous, and it is made up of a continuity of interrelationship between all the variables. Any one of the variables here is therefore dependent upon, it is interconnected by, or participatory upon, or complementary with all the other variables. Let's call all the other variables to be x prime. And this interrelationship that interconnect the variables together is essentially the function of theta. So we have got as many as variables that we try to examine, so many other relationships, that is to say equations, we will have. At the end of all of that is a measurement of the well-being of the well-beings that has been generated by means of these kinds of interconnected system according to the principles that I have applied, the primal ontology, the epistemology, and now we are being brought over to a measurement, that is empirical exercise. This empirical exercise is what is called the phenomenology of the system. And the phenomenology that you have there, the phenomenology is essentially extracting out the consciousness that is embedded in the system by the presence of theta being derived from the primal ontology and carried through the episteme into a measured world system. And this measurement that comes about to read the phenomenology, this is called the well-being. The well-being. It has gotten its name in Arabic to make contextual meaning with the Islamic way of looking at such kinds of unified interrelationship, marking the organic unity of things, the relational unity of things, which are represented by their specific variables. So we have got this this tripartite, three levels of delineating, of explaining to you what are the three structures, points. The first one is the ontology, which I have given you it through two-part definition. The second is the episteme, or the episteme of unity of knowledge, derived from how knowledge is derived and constructed by way of referring to the original or primal ontology and through the process of discourse. And this is the episteme of the unity of knowledge. And the third is to take the first two and construct it through a formal process, bring it to the level of methods, models, analysis, empirical work, and inferences. And this is the phenomenology. That is to say, it is the extraction of the degree to which the world has learned itself to a certain level, and this level is being measured, and that level, when measured, represents the level of what we call is the conscious well-being, or the consciousness of the whole system. Now, when you have all of those kind of things, then we have constructed a space. And this space is a space of events, E. And as I have told you, events are extensive. So you've got extension of events that keep on going and interacting with each other. And these things evolve. So along with that, the domain also evolves, okay, and keeps on going. And this is a continuity principle, and it is essential for the continued repetition or the continued process of learning in unity of knowledge from the beginning to the end. And thus the whole system becomes an evolutionary structure of unity of knowledge. But at the same time, while it is reading the unity of knowledge, it is also reading the opposite of it, which is falsehood, that is non-unity of knowledge. Both of them are therefore explained by the emergent methodology that comes out of this kind of a study. Now, from there on, we have got many events, and each event is represented by those three things, such as theta, space of theta, and time of theta. And this is for every event that this happens. Now, this event it is a choice. In economics, we begin by the idea of choice, a choice of things. And these choices are then governed by the postulates, that is, the axioms that economic, as we study them, has constructed. But in this particular case, we have similar kind of a preference, a choice. And this is represented by rho. So rho is therefore an event which is interconnected, let us say, with markets. Markets create things which we choose. When we choose things, we demand things, and therefore the market comes to supply those kinds of things, and there is an interaction. But this rho that is yours and mine in society as a whole really makes us conscious beings. Therefore we learn, and learning itself is therefore a social phenomenon. Therefore rho itself is also determined by the embedded theta. Hence rho is not a static thing, rather it is a dynamic process. And this is a magnificent difference that is brought about from the way that we understand choices, from the idea of economic rationality, which represents one way of understanding choices. And in this particular case, we are taking the choices to be dynamic. And this dynamic nature of choices, it alters many of the postulates, almost all of the postulates of economic rationality upon which economic, as we study them, really rests upon. Now, economics is a science. Like this, there are other sciences, which are some of the physical sciences and other sciences. All of them, they embody the same kinds of implications. And therefore, a new science that extends itself from the time-space structure, or the space-time structure, is now extended into knowledge-space-time structure, upon which the primal ontology is that of knowledge when it is derived from Tawhid, that is monotheistic, or monotheism, oneness of God, as a fundamental ontology, that is primal ontology. And all the rest of the details then carry on from this very cursory form of an overview of the structure of the Tawhidi, of Tawhid as law, which is quad, that is, it is different and it is constructive rather than internalized only. And the internal matter is important, but it exists in the form of belief. But we cannot externalize and read and evaluate belief. Therefore, Tawhid has to be studied as law, and this law is the manifestation of how the oneness of God, that is the episteme of unity of knowledge, works in the world system. Thank you.